Hello, everybody. Welcome to Drinks with Tegis yet again. I am here with amazing guest of honor, the one and only Jerry, Josh's uncle. How are you doing, Jerry?
I'm doing well, Tegis. How about yourself?
I'm doing all right. I'm doing all right. You can just call me TJ if that's easier.
It
Most people
is?
do. Yeah.
Okay.
But we're here to talk about bourbon today,
Yeah.
and you know a thing or two about bourbon. You come highly recommended.
Well, thank you. Yeah. I'm from a long, I've got a long history in bourbon. I'm eighth generation in the bourbon industry. Well, the distilling industry. We didn't make bourbon the whole time. We made rye for a while.
All right. So I always start the show off with a question, and the question is always, what do you know about the history of the drink? So what do you know about the history of bourbon?
And how far back do you want to go?
I always start at the beginning because I usually
Sure.
have to do this part.
Yeah. Well, uh, bourbon is a uniquely American beverage, and the early settlers were rum drinkers. And actually, I've read some things about how much rum was consumed per capita for every man, woman, and child, and it's an amazing amount. It's a wonder how they got anything done at all. Uh,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. We
uh,
did our rum episode and the numbers are up there. If you're
yeah,
listening
yeah.
and haven't checked that one out, definitely do.
So I read an interesting article about the Boston Tea Party, and they said the Boston Tea Party was more about rum than it was about tea, and that was because the way that the slave trade worked, they would go in a circle. They would go from Europe down to Africa, pick up trade slaves, go across to the Dominican Republic, sell the slaves, and then load the boats with sugar, and then go up the coast to New England and sell the sugar, and they would make rum, and then they would take rum and take it back to Europe, so that they had a cargo every leg of the a step of the way. Well, um, they're the people who made rum in England were really upset about this. They wanted the sugar brought to them so that they could make the rum and then sell the rum to us. They didn't like it the other way around. And you've heard the whole taxation without representation. There were no well, the people in the new colonies didn't have any representatives in Parliament, or in England, Europe, all of that. So they passed the laws and they said, no, you got to do this the other way around. And that's really what the Boston Tea Party was about, according to, well, it was actually not an article, it was a book I read.
Hmm.
And everyone was making such a ruckus. And Benjamin Franklin said, hey, instead of sugar cane, we have this product here called corn, and it's very stable and it converts easily to sugar. And why don't we just make a corn liquor? And that is essentially the birth of bourbon. Was putting kind of you sticking your thumb up, to the European, uh, the monarchy. Now, bourbon itself didn't really develop right away. We started making whiskey, kind of like they made, of course, there was Scotch whiskey and Irish whiskey and other whiskeys. Um, Bourbon started in Bourbon County, which I believe was originally West Virginia. It was huge. I mean, Bourbon County was as big as like four states, and it was gifted to the French monarchy and the Bourbon dynasty, the Bourbon family. But eventually Bourbon got smaller and smaller, and there is still a Bourbon County in Kentucky. Oddly enough, it was dry till just a couple of years ago, but that's where really bourbon is credited with starting in Bourbon County, Kentucky, which is just east of Lexington.
All right.
So
So bourbon's an interesting one. It always interests me a lot when, whatever organization may be decides that a product is only that product when it is from here and this is done to it. Like
mhm,
champagne is only champagne if it's made with grapes from Champagne, France.
correct.
And bourbon, I'm pretty sure has restrictions like that where it has to be at least 51% corn. And
So there's bourbon was sold to the soldiers in the Civil War, and it was mass produced. And bourbon really took off, and people started making it in Chicago and New York City and everywhere else. And some really sleazy people got into it, as often get into business when they're selling to soldiers and selling to the government. Um, and they were doing things like putting in turpentine, paint thinner, different colorings to give it that color of bourbon, but people were dying from it. And so bourbon almost died off after the Civil War because people were dying from it. And the bourbon and the distillers went to Congress and they lobbied and said, hey, we need some rules to say what exactly is bourbon. And that, you're talking about the 51%, all those rules came about. Now, the trade off was they originally bourbon was a Kentucky product, and us Kentuckians still feel that it is, and we've got a lot of reasons for that. But the Congress said that bourbon can be made anywhere if it meets these rules, and you can't add any sugar, you can't add any flavoring. It has to be uh, um, aged in a charred oak barrel. It has to be at least 4 years old, and there's a lot of rules around it. Um, but touch on this real quick. You can have the exact same barrel, exact same product, exact same mash bill. The real secret is the yeast, the strain of yeast. And you can buy a strain of yeast. You can actually have it custom manufactured to your specifications. I believe there's a place in Chicago that does it, probably other places too. But that's why Jack Daniels is whiskey, I'm sorry, but Jim Beam and Heaven Hill and Barton and Maker's Mark and all the other distilleries, they all taste different because they all introduce a different strain of yeast. And that strain of yeast is repeatedly introduced so that you have a consistent and stable product over the years.
Hmm. That's one of the really interesting things, doing drinks with Tegis over the years, and I've learned a lot about brewing beer,
Hmm.
and I've learned so many names for yeast that I didn't know existed. From specific breweries, specific strands,
Hmm.
and it's wild. It's insane if you're not familiar with the distilling or brewing process, how deep it really gets.
Yeah.
Because yeah, you get the boutique yeast. You're accentuating flavors no one's ever even heard of.
Hmm.
That thing's name is 13 syllables long, and it's delicious.
So I've read something recently, and this is not about bourbon exactly, but it's about beer. And they talk about how ales and lagers are different, and
Hmm.
that you scrape the yeast off the top. If I remember correctly, you scrape the yeast off the top in an ale, and in a
Hmm.
lager, you pull it off and you scrape the yeast off the bottom of the barrel, the bottom of the vat. And in Germany, the word is gist, and that's yeast. And so to get to the gist of it, you're getting to the bottom of the vat. You're scraping the yeast out of the bottom of the vat. And I thought, what a great word.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. Etymology is so funny. So
yeah,
just
sure is.
sometimes in
Yeah.
situations like that.
So, and when you distill the bourbon, you start with a beer. You make a beer, and then you pull off the yeast, and then you know, throw away all the slop, and you don't actually throw it away. You sell it to pig farmers and cattle farmers and things like that because it's, uh, you know, it's a great feed and really fatten them up. But then you distill it after you make the beer. So you're never making a beer like you and I would drink.
Right. Right. So why don't you walk us through the process as an eighth generation distiller? What is it like to brew or distill a bourbon?
Well, I mean, I've only got a unique perspective. I mean, I've worked at my grandfather's distillery, and my dad, was an executive there for years. And so the thing
If it's a,
is,
if it's a trade secret, you can keep it a trade
no,
secret.
no, no,
That's
no, it's not
fine.
a trade secret. I'm just saying that for all the stories that we tell and all the marketing and advertising, it's it's a distillery. It's a factory. You're cranking out alcoholic beverages, and so you bring in all the ingredients, you cook them. Now in the fermenting room when you're letting it sit, it's really neat. I love it. I love the smell. If you're not from it, and if it's not in your family, some people don't like the smell, but it's actually pulling so much oxygen out of the room and releasing carbon dioxide that it will take your breath away. And if you stick your head over a vat and breathe in, it can knock you to your knees. Um, so then after that's done, then you take it and you pull that off, and then you distill it. And so distilling it is basically heating it. You've seen it in science class, and you've got the coils that go around the
Hmm.
top, and all you're getting is a true alcohol, and you're putting that in a barrel, and then you store it. Now we did it differently. Everybody does it differently. What we did was we rotated our barrels. So you would put a barrel on the first, a barrel warehouse is called a rick house. And you might put some on the first floor, second floor, third floor, all the way up. And we'd rotate it so that the product would mature evenly. Because in Kentucky, it gets to be 100 degrees in August and it gets down to zero in January. And so you're constantly getting it, you're absorbing all the wood sugars from the barrels. And so hot and cold and hot and cold. And that's part of the reason that we like Kentucky bourbon is because you do have true four seasons and you get to absorb, all that wood sugar. Another reason is because our water is really hard. We have a high limestone content, and so the hard water and the four seasons help make it. But anyhow, the point was to have a consistent, steady product year after year and rotating the barrels. Now, other distilleries like Buffalo Trace, they don't rotate their barrels. They put some on the seventh floor and they keep it there for umpteen number of years, and that's the best. They sell it at a premium, and the next one down, and the next one down. It might be the exact same mash bill, but they're selling it under 5 or 6 different labels because of where it's stored in the warehouse.
Right.
And I was blown away when I learned that.
Yeah. So y'all believe in a consistent product.
Well, they believe in a consistent product too. It's just that we were mass producing a label, one or two, three labels, and they had a dozen. I mean,
Hmm.
and actually, from a safety point of view, I don't know a man that worked in a rick house that had all 10 fingers. I mean, they had most of 10 fingers, but if you have a barrel with steel rims around either end and it's 550 pounds and you're rolling it along, if you that barrel pinches you against a wall or a post or anything, you lose the tip of that finger. I mean, it's a dangerous business.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I
and
believe that.
well, and also as we were on the river, because before the highway system and before trains, the river was the highway. And so that's the reason you have so many distilleries along the Ohio River, because you can go from New England, way up in New England, and Allegheny and the Monongahela merge there at the confluence of the Ohio River there at Pittsburgh, and you can go all the way down to the Gulf, to the Mississippi River, to the Gulf of Mexico, and out to the world. And so it's just a lot easier to make your product near a river, put it on a boat, and ship it on out. So they were rolling these barrels a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Being at a rick house sounds pretty awesome and not great for your hands, just
Well,
in general.
nowadays, one of my cousins works at a rick house, and they have forklifts and machines and
Ah,
lifts, and everything is very safe.
ah.
And that's a good thing, But I mean, it didn't used to always be that way.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. We're on Drinks with Tejas. We're anti OSHA.
Uh huh.
Yeah. Don't expect us for workplace violations. I'm sitting in my room, but not a big fan personally.
Sure.
Yeah. But I feel like a lot of people really underestimate how big a barrel is.
Yeah.
Barrels have faded out of the common perception.
Yeah. A barrel's I mean, I'm not that big, but a barrel is more than waist height to most people. Chest height to others, and it holds a lot of liquid. And now, of course, the longer you age it, I mean, there was a time when you used to age fine bourbons for 12 or 15 years, but then it got to the point where you were just aging them 4 years, kicking it out, selling it. Now you're seeing some, they're making a little longer. I think there's a Pappy Van Winkle that's 21 years, something like that. But most of them are 4, 6, 8 years, something like that. Um, but of course, where you put it in the warehouse is how soon it's going to be mature and ready to sell.
Right. So, is there a theoretical limit to how long a bourbon should be aged, or is it just constantly maturing the flavor? Is there ever a point where it's diminishing returns?
Well, the thing is that The longer it sits in the barrel, um, evaporation occurs.
Mm,
So the longer it sits in the barrel, I mean, it's getting great flavor, but if you wait too long, you don't have anything left to sell. So you keep it in there as long as you can, but then you put it in a bottle and you sell it.
right. Right. So once it's bottled, that's when the maturation of the flavor is finished.
When you take it out of the barrel, correct? You take it out of the barrel, and then you get some different things there. You see things like a single barrel bourbon.
Hmm.
You see, what you do in a lot of places is you get all the barrels, you dump them in a vat, and you put them in, and then you put them in the bottles. Run it down a bottling line, which is a conveyor belt, and you have a filler, and this thing is just going balls to the wall, filling bottles, put on corks and caps. I mean, again, it's a factory. A single barrel bourbon is you're going to take that barrel and you're going to dump it into a vat and you're going to fill all the bottles till that's gone. Until so you're only getting I've forgotten how many it is, but you're only getting X numbers of bottles about it. So there's a single batch where you could have a single strain of yeast, a single brew, a single distilling process, and it might fill, I don't know, 50 barrels. So you can have a single batch. You can have a small batch bourbon. You can have a single barrel bourbon, but you can also have just the mass produced stuff. I visited Jim Beam Distillery in Claremont, Kentucky, near Bardstown,
Hmm.
um, and I was blown away by the size of their stainless steel vats. I mean, these people are kicking out some bourbon. It's just massive. It's unbelievable.
Oh
But I
yeah,
think they're the largest bourbon distiller in the world.
they are. They are by a hefty margin.
Yeah.
But that's what happens when mass production occurs
Oh
and,
yeah.
and
Yeah.
good marketing.
Right. Right.
So about your family's company,
Hmm.
the reason you're on the show, the reason Josh told me about you, and just as a quick side note, longtime fans of the show might remember Allie, who hosted a few episodes. That's Jerry's daughter, whose mic
Yeah.
he's using. So
Yeah.
yeah,
She made the mistake of leaving it here, so
that's more for us.
that's right. That's
Yeah.
right.
So tell us about your company or your family's
Oh,
company.
I'm not in the business anymore. My dad had early onset Alzheimer's, and he had been the president of the Kentucky Distillers Association. Um, but when I got out of college, and I'd worked in there at the distillery in high school and college, but I'm from well, so I'm Catholic. A lot of distillers are. You don't have to be, but we always joke around. Wherever there's three or four Catholics, there's usually a fifth, and we have great
That's pretty
Christmas
funny.
parties, and we often end up with big families. So I'm one of 99 grandchildren, and I have been blessed with a lot of really intelligent, hardworking um, relatives who are still in the industry. But when Dad got out, I was I went into computers instead.
Right.
Uh, but I was raised in it. I'm still around it, and have been my whole life. My great grandfather owned Davis County Distillery, and it was the largest distillery in North America. And it was shut down by Prohibition.
Mm.
And he was left to feed his 15 children, doing whatever he could. And after Prohibition, my grandfather and four of his brothers bought. So when my grandfather, when they closed it down, he sold the distillery to a packing house, and they did really well.
Mm.
So after Prohibition, we couldn't buy back because they had a great business going. So my grandfather and his brothers uh, started a distillery next door, and they called it the Five Brothers. And they made it for, gosh, well, all the way up into the mid 80s. Now, that current distillery is now owned by, it's actually, I believe it's the Bardstown Bourbon Company owns it, but the brand on the distillery is the Green River Distilling Company. Green River was on that property before my grandfather built it, but it burned to the ground, and my
Hmm.
grandfather and his brothers built it up. Some interesting things about distilleries that you may not know. Um, they make a highly flammable product.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so you'll see some interesting things here in Owensboro in Davis County. The Glenmore Distillery, they have earthen berms around each warehouse, and the idea is that if the warehouse burned to the ground, it would fill like a lake of bourbon, but it wouldn't take all the other warehouses down. My grandfather and his brothers did it a little differently. They built brick warehouses so that hopefully, if it burned, it wouldn't be that bad. But uh, Heaven Hill Distillery in Bardstown, Kentucky, not but I don't know 8-10 years ago, they had a warehouse catch fire, and it caught the next one and the next one, and all of the burning bourbon went downhill and killed a ton of fish. Uh, Something about
Yeah,
flaming bourbon entering the water system.
yeah.
So I mean, it can be very dangerous. So that's something you have to do. But
Man,
um,
that'd probably
so
kill me too, to be fair.
yeah, oh yeah, yeah. But they're back when they used to have. You used to be able to advertise alcohol in magazines and newspapers, and then they banned it for the longest time because they said they were advertising to kids. But when I was a boy, I remember seeing a commercial of a guy sitting on a curb, and he had a bottle of whiskey in a bag, and it had broken. And the slogan was, "Have you ever seen a grown man cry?" And it's kind of reminding me of what you just said there.
Yeah, yeah. That kind of reminds me of I never remember what year it is, but in Boston there was like a molasses flood.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, it was 18 something, 1820 something, and it just massive wave of molasses
Yeah.
killed a ton of people, destroyed buildings. That kind of stuff is insane to me.
That just I know. Could you imagine? I mean,
Can you imagine a
yeah.
lake of bourbon? I mean, as far as natural disasters go, that one sounds pretty sick.
That sounds like a Muddy Water song, gonna jump in the river and
Yeah. So, let's the show normally is more focused on our favorite drink.
okay.
And do you drink?
I do. I brought
Perfect.
one with me today, little bourbon. I drink it neat.
That is how I choose to drink bourbon when I do. I made a misstep today and forgot, but normally I would join you. But tell us about it. Tell us about the bourbon you're drinking.
Well, it is 100 proof, and I like it neat. And I just like I say, I just sip on it. Um, I mean, however you like your bourbon is the right way to drink it. So, there's no judgment going on. But to me, ice will just deaden your taste buds. So now I don't mind having a water back, something to sip on. I don't mind ice water, but I prefer to drink my bourbon neat. I, if I never mix anything in my bourbon. Um, Now, if I have some rock gut bourbon and I'm at like a tailgate party, I might put in some Sprite, Mountain Dew, ginger ale, whatever's available. But if you have a good bourbon, pour a glass of good bourbon, drink it room temperature, sip on it, make it last hours, and it's just great. Um, but so what I like to do is, as opposed to getting a particular brand, because now the bourbon has taken off and you can't hardly get anything.
Hmm.
Now in Kentucky, we have our liquor stores are independently owned. My brother lives in North Carolina, and everything's government controlled. And he told me about there's no variety because they don't like empty shelves. If you can't keep that shelf full, they don't want your product, which means they're only selling mass produced bourbons.
Hmm.
Um, I have found that some bourbons that are just okay, if it's a cask strength or a single barrel or the master distiller select, it's unbelievable because the way you get as a consistent 80 proof product is you take a barrel and you water it down. I mean, it probably going to come out of the barrel at 114 proof, maybe 119 proof, something like that. But most people are just taken back by that, and it's too hot, and so they'll water it down. Well, some amount of 80 proof bottle of bourbon. I mean, it might be okay, but water's already been added. And if I get something straight out of the cask, I feel like I'm getting more of the oaky, the maple, the cinnamon, whatever flavors are in that particular one. I just find it better. Now it's expensive that way. I mean,
Hmm.
you're probably going to pay minimum $60 a bottle. Um, but I've seen things for $100 that were just flat out nasty. Um, and I won't tell you here on the air. But if you ever wanted to know, I could tell you. Don't try
Oh
that
no,
one.
it's fine. No, we take recommendations on the show.
Yeah.
Our viewers,
Well,
they won't chase us down.
the problem I have is that I have so many family members in the business. If I say I
Mm,
like this one and not that one, I'm going to piss somebody off somewhere. And I don't know if they're seeing your podcast, but this is now on the internet forever potentially.
that's
So
true. That is true.
I'm going to stay neutral and say that there's a lot of good ones out there, but buy a good one.
All right.
Do a little research. Go to the big place that has a wide selection.
We call it greens over here.
Is it
Hmm.
good? Well, you're going to find that this time of year they release a lot of stuff around Christmas, and you might get things that are only going to be released around Christmas. Now, some of that is just because it's so popular, people are buying it. Some of it is marketing. It's planned scarcity, and so they can drive the price up. Hate that, but it is what it is. But if you have a little extra money around Christmas, it's not a bad time to buy a couple extra bottles and put them on the shelf.
Right. So, as far as the mass-produced stuff, are you comfortable telling us a favorite?
Probably my favorite mass-produced bourbon is Very Old Barton. They make an 80 and 86 and 90 and 100 proof. I just think that it's reasonably priced. It's decent. It tastes like bourbon ought to. I've had some other bourbons that I just didn't like. There's a really, really, really popular bourbon that I do not like at all, and they also make a rye and they make a double oak and they make all the different varieties of their bourbon. And I've toured their facility, and to me, everything tastes the same. It's like, oh, this is the exact same strain of yeast aged 2 more years. This is the same strain of yeast double oaked, and it all tastes the same. Well, tastes similar enough that I don't like it.
Right.
Um, uh, Now this is not bourbon, but I've been getting into rye a little bit. Now rye's a rye whiskey. It's a high rye. It's a little sweeter. And of course, that's what I like about bourbon is that it's sweet. And that's not
Mm.
much of a Scotch fan at all. But there's some really good ryes out there as well, and some are very reasonable. I guess till they take off, like anything else.
Right. Yeah, but that's why I drink rum. It's sweet. It's good
Yeah.
and
Uh,
usually cheap.
My brother got me a bottle of rum from somewhere down in the Caribbean, and but what they did they aged it in whiskey barrels,
Mm-hmm.
and it
Mm-hmm.
was really really good. Um, but I mean, he got it out of the states, so I'll never get another bottle. I don't even know the name of it, but I think rum's and rum's one of those things like I can put rum in my eggnog. I usually put bourbon in there or whiskey or something like that. I said I don't mix things with my whiskey. I don't buy $100 bottle of bourbon and put it in eggnog, but I do like to add a little kick to the eggnog, and
Right.
it is that time of year.
It is that time of the season. I do. I like to add a little rum to my eggnog. I think
Yeah,
rum goes great in a lot of things, but I don't think a lot of things go great in rum because there is a difference,
yeah, true, true.
big difference. But one of my favorite beers is Innocent Gun, and I don't ever remember the actual flavor, but they age
Hmm.
it in a rum barrel.
That
It's
sounds so. I don't know if this is a nationwide thing or just a local thing, but the Kentucky Bourbon Barrel Company makes a Kentucky Bourbon Barrel Ale, and they're in Lexington, Kentucky, and they make a good dark beer and they age it in a whiskey barrel. Um, but let me tell you, um, it comes out about 9% alcohol by volume, so it's like drinking 4 Coors Light. And if you don't like bourbon, you're going to hate this beer, so don't buy it. But if you do like bourbon, it's an excellent beer. But it's not something you're going to chug a lug. It's almost like eating a brownie. It's so rich
mm, that's
and
perfect.
filling that you might have two, but if you have more than that, you're just well,
Hey, 'tis the season. It's getting cold
yeah.
outside. Now you start drinking out the stouts and the porters.
That's right. That's right.
That's what I've been doing
Yeah. I got
personally.
some Dragon's Ale the other day, and that was pretty good too.
I
I
bet.
think that was 11% alcohol by volume, which is, you know, two
High.
all day if you sip on it.
Yeah. Man, 11% for a beer is a little wild.
Isn't it though?
That's a little crazy.
I'm not certain how they do it. I read an article years ago and they said that what some of these people were doing were basically brewing it and freezing it and then
Mm,
taking off whatever froze because that's water and what's left is a higher alcohol content. But I'm not really certain what they're doing. You asked me to talk about bourbon. I'm just saying that there are beers I like too.
right. Yeah. Drinking man, drinks. That's how it works.
That's right.
So do you have, any other notes for us on the bourbon or the industry itself?
Hmm. Well, I think it might be a good idea to go back to the same liquor store again and again if you can. Because that way, if you need a special bottle for a special occasion, they might be able to set one back for you and hold one for you. Kentucky's totally different than where you guys are. We at Sam's Club and Costco and all that, you do not have to be a member to buy alcohol there because it's against the law to make you be a member to buy alcohol at an establishment in Kentucky.
Hmm.
So maybe you need to make a road trip to Kentucky, and,
Yeah.
and get something down here.
I just drove to Missouri the other week, so I'm
Yeah,
all tapped out for half country road trips for now.
there you go.
Maybe
Yeah,
next year.
yeah.
But yeah, no, it was crazy. I want to say we were in Illinois and we stopped at a gas station and I walked in and there was rum on the shelf and I was like, "Well, this is different for me.
Yeah,
That doesn't happen. We don't
yeah.
get liquor in our convenience stores, in our grocery stores, nothing. Liquor's at the liquor store only."
So, when I was a boy, they didn't sell liquor on Sundays, but they do now,
Hmm.
just about everywhere. But when I was a younger man and I was in Louisville going to college, um, bars stay up until 2 a.m. in Louisville. And Derby week, the Kentucky Derby week, they're allowed to stay up until 4. And it's just a whole different attitude. I mean, but if you come to Kentucky, you can tour probably 40 different distilleries in, well, I don't know, say a 60-mile radius. I mean, they're everywhere. Of course, the sad part is for me is that they're all owned by Diageo
Hmm.
Sazerac is, I believe, is a family-owned company, but um, they're these multinational corporations have bought them. But if you think about it, during Prohibition, other countries had distilleries and alcohol companies growing larger and larger and larger, where we all had to start over. And what was it? When was Prohibition over?
1920,
1920. Yeah. So
something like that.
yeah. Well, I mean, you look at something like Bass Ale. I mean, Bass. I mean, they said Napoleon didn't was it Bass Ale that Napoleon drank a Bass before every battle? You
I
know.
haven't heard that.
Um,
Let's find out.
yeah.
If I had
There
to
you
guess,
go.
I would have guessed Guinness. But man, isn't the information age amazing?
Yes, it really is. Yeah. Every time I have a question, I Google it, and that's just one more thing I know.
Uh, ooh, this one might be a bit deeper. Belgian beer. But while I'm looking this up, I might as well to speak on that point, getting to know your liquor store. There's actually a slightly smaller than the big boys store a bit down the street from me,
Hmm.
and I've been going over there and hanging out, buying stuff, and now I'm getting ready to grease them up really good and see if they'll order me a Schwarz beer from Germany,
Yeah.
because I like to make glue beer at for Christmas. And glue beer is really, really top notch when you're able to use, an actual black beer like you're supposed to. And
Okay.
it's just hard to find over here, but it's definitely worth it.
Yeah. So at our Kroger's, and do you all have Kroger's, or you have what, Harris Teeter or
We
something like
have
that?
we have Kroger's and Harris Teeter just around. They're not like
Yeah.
common, but they're
The
around.
our Kroger's recently opened a, I won't say a bar, but they've had the liquor store for a while, but you can actually get beer on tap while you shop, which sounds good uh, until it doesn't. you know,
Yeah.
um, you might end up, with too many nachos or cheese curls or something like that if you're drinking too many beers while you're shopping because it's a
Mm.
big cart.
All right, that sounds pretty awesome to me.
Yeah.
That's ideal. Because we'll go shopping, and my dad will pick up a snack and eat it while he's shopping, and then pay for it when he leaves. But
Yeah.
that just sounds a
We
little better to me.
we went to a place called Trader Joe's in Cincinnati, Ohio. I don't know if it's a chain or not,
It
but
is. We
uh,
have Trader Joe's.
oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I said Trader Joe's. I meant Jungle Jim's.
Okay, I was about to say no.
Totally
We have
different thing.
Trader
Totally
Joe's.
different thing. They had, I think, 400 brands of beer, maybe 4,000. I don't know, but it was ridiculous. But it wasn't just beer. I mean, they had like a whole hot sauce section. Their hot sauce section was larger than a convenience store. It was a
God.
massive grocery store. And I got some of the dark beers you're talking about because I'd never heard of them. Some of them, and I just got a bunch. I got some Russian beers and, of course, German beers. But I got way too many beers. But I wanted to try them. I didn't know when I'd be back, and it's not like they went bad.
Exactly. Exactly. That's what I do here on Drinks with Tejas.
Yeah,
If I can afford it and there's something interesting, I'm gonna buy
yeah,
it.
yeah.
I've been that way my whole life.
So I'll tell you what I won't do. Some of these bottles that are really, really popular that have a list price of $60 and they sell for 200, 400, some of them 2,000 on the internet because of the scarcity. That is, I just won't do it. I've tasted some of them. Some friends of mine have had them, and and they've actually been pretty good. They taste like a good $60 bottle of bourbon. They just didn't taste like a $200 bottle of bourbon.
Hmm.
And I don't know that I would. I'd have to hit the lotto, and probably even then I'd think twice.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not I wouldn't tell a lot of people if I won the lottery, but there would be signs.
Yeah.
That might be one of them.
Yep.
How do you feel? I'll ask one last question here, and I think it's about time for us to wrap up. But I've noticed a trend, I would say, of extremely niche trend, but people who drink and have bars of their own,
Hmm.
uh, a few of them, the ones that host, have started doing the barrel. I don't remember what prefix the barrel had, but if someone brought a bottle over, they were requested to bring two, and they put one of the bottles just dumped it into a barrel with everything else. How would that make you feel?
I would kick somebody in the zipper.
Yeah,
What the hell are you thinking?
yeah. Isn't that wild?
I've never heard that. I've never heard
Isn't
that.
that insane?
Yeah.
It's neat. Thank God it's niche, but
Yeah.
I don't know. I would taste it.
So throw out one other thing that's just my 2 cents worth. Um, I'm old enough that I've gotten over the collectors uh, bourbons.
Hmm.
You know, um, U of L won the NCAA men's basketball championship, and Maker's Mark came out with a special bottle,
Yep.
and it's red with a black label, or I'm sorry, red label and black wax instead of the typical red wax, and that's cool. But I just feel like I like to drink bourbon. I like to buy bourbon that I'm going to drink rather than have something that is a collector's item. And truth be told, I've got one or two collector's items just because back when I used to do that, and now they're worth so much. I actually got a Makers that is the very first one where they did with the blue wax when the
Mm.
Kentucky Wildcats when the NCAA might have been the '80s, and it's worth like $550. But really, it's a $36 bottle of bourbon with blue wax.
Hmm.
So if UK ever wins again, call me up. I might be selling it. So I mean, there's no point in drinking that because it's so valuable. But I've just gotten over. I'm not buying bourbons to collect. Now, I might buy something if I have access to something that's really good that I know is hard to get. Save it for a special occasion, a wedding. Actually, a funeral can be a special occasion too. We have a lot of Irish wakes, and we all sit around and share a bottle and tell good stories about how much fun someone was, or at least what honorary stuff they did. But it's not going to go on the mantle for everyone to look at, for infinity.
Right.
Probably upsetting a lot of distillers right now because that's a good market niche. It's like making $2 bills. You get to create them, put them in circulation, but then everybody buys them and saves them. And well, I guess the idea of a special bottle is to save it, but I'm over that.
Right. See, that's why the only like collector's liquor I've ever bought was vodka, because there's no way I'm gonna open that bottle.
I've often thought if I want to quit drinking, I'd buy scotch because it's so nasty. I have trouble choking it down.
Yeah. I got the Carolina Hurricanes New Amsterdam bottle.
Yeah.
And that's just gonna sit there forever until it evaporates out of that wrapped glass bottle. So I might just have it forever. We'll see.
Well, now I do want to put the caveat on there real quick. So I'm not knocking scotch drinkers. I know people who love scotch and the meaty and the peat and all that flavor, but I like bourbon because it's sweet. And by the time when distillers sell their used barrels to the scotch manufacturers, after it's been in a bourbon barrel for 8 years or more, you've already got all the sugar out of it, and you're just putting it in a used barrel to age it. It's not sweet. I don't like it when it's not sweet. So to each of their own, but I don't like it.
Right. And, that's kind of the thing we do. It's to each their own here on Drinks with Tegis. That's why we have so many episodes. But thank you all so much for listening. Thank you, Jerry, for giving us your time today. You did not disappoint. Highly requested, highly delivered. But if you're listening at home, I want to know, do you have a favorite bourbon, or do you not like bourbon at all? If so, maybe try a different bourbon. Seems like it might be the right move. And we're recording this right before Thanksgiving. I think by the time it comes out, it will be after Thanksgiving. So I hope you had a good one. I hope you're thankful, and maybe even you put us on the list of things you're thankful for. I don't want to sound, desperate, but that'd be cool if you remember. But thank you so much. We'll see you next time. Remember, we love having you here. We couldn't do this without you. See you next time. I love you. Good night.